In honor of the release of the 6th season of the anime, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, I want to remind you of what happened in the earlier parts. But before we begin, please support the channel with a like and a subscription. Everything began in England, where the horses veered off the road, taking the lives of everyone except George Joestar and his son Jonathan Joestar. Dario Brando tried to rob them, but George mistook him for a savior and said he was now indebted to Dario. Then we jump 12 years forward and see Brando dying. He has a son named Dio, but Dio doesn't really care about his father, as Brando spends all day drinking instead of getting treatment. Because of this, Dio earns a living by hustling people in chests. Jojo, the only son of Joestar, steps in to defend the girl he's just met, but it doesn't go well, and he gets seriously punished. Jojo got into an annoyingly lost fight, not to impress the girl, but because he is a true gentleman. Before his death, Dario sends his son Dio to live with the Joestars since they owe him a debt. Dio hated his father because he drove his mother to the grave. He said he would become someone who never loses. Dio dramatically arrives at the Joestars and immediately kicks the dog. He did it to break Jojo's spirit and take his inheritance for himself. Dio Brando was warmly welcomed at the mansion, and Jonathan tried to help him with his luggage to get closer and become friends. However, Dio hit him too, declaring he wants to be number one and will turn Jojo's life into a living nightmare. Joestar took a liking to Dio because he was significantly more refined than his son. Eventually, they clashed in a fight where Dio put Jojo to sleep with a single blow. Brando made sure no one spoke to Jonathan, which made him deeply hate Dio. But Irina, the girl he defended, stayed by his side and they fell in love. So Dio defiled her with a kiss to keep Jojo from seeing her. Because of this, Jonathan attacked Brando and punched him, but George stopped them. Dio couldn't bear such humiliation, and to further break Jojo's spirit, he burned his dog. They lived in hatred for 7 years and graduated from the same academy. Everyone considers them the perfect duo, but Jojo still doesn't trust Dio, despite his adoption, and Dio plans to claim the entire inheritance for himself after Joestar's death. When Jojo was experimenting with the mask that changed its appearance when blood touched it, he accidentally discovered a note from Dario, which revealed that he was suffering from the same illness as Joestar. Jojo realized that Dio had been poisoning his father Dario, and he was doing the same to Joestar, substituting poison for his medicine. Jonathan attempted to expose him, and after a brief dialogue, he threw him out from the second floor. Jojo went to London to find an antidote for the poison, and encountered 3 thugs there, whom he easily humiliated, earning their respect. Because of his depression, Dio starts drinking quite a bit, and on his way home, he encounters 2 drunks. He decides to test the stone mask on one of them, and when the mask pierces the drunk's head, he turns into a vampire. The vampire delivers a single blow, breaking Dio's collarbone and sending him flying, then begins to drain his blood. But at the last moment, Dio is saved by rays of light, turning the vampire into dust. When Dio returns to the mansion, he encountered Jojo, who had already found evidence against him. Brando asked for a little more time to surrender, at a more convenient moment, but his lie was detected by Speedwagon, who had been following Jonathan out of concern for him. They brought a Chinese man who confessed to selling poison to Dio. Their conversation was overheard by Joestar, who said he was very disappointed in Dio, and asked Jojo to take care of everything. Before his arrest, Dio says that humans are very limited, and he wants to surpass humanity, after which he stabs Joestar with a knife and uses his blood to activate the mask. The police shoot Dio, and he temporarily loses consciousness. Joestar says goodbye to Jojo, gives him his ring, and then dies in his arms. At that moment, Dio regains consciousness, and with one swift move strikes the police inspector. Speedwagon shoots him in the head, but Dio doesn't even notice the bullet. To demonstrate his power, Dio drains all the energy from a policeman and turns him into a vampire, who then begins to suck the blood from Speedwagon, but Jojo saves him. Then Jonathan stabs Dio with a spear, but it turns out he is immortal. They try to burn him, but the flames don't harm him either. Jojo lures Dio onto the roof to save Speedwagon and attempt to kill the vampire. Jonathan jumped with Brando into the flames, and pushing off the wall, pinned Dio onto a statue. Due to the fire, Jonathan lost everything and Speedwagon took him to the hospital. He decided to help Jojo in every way possible so he could continue to live. Irina came to Jonathan to treat his wounds and take care of him. Then he reveals Jack the Ripper and Dio, who turned out to be alive. Brando transforms Jack into a vampire and recruits him into his gang. Jojo went to the burned mansion because he's still concerned about the stone mask. While walking with Irina, they met William Zeppeli, who healed Jojo by applying a finger and changing his breathing. He demonstrated the full power of his breathing technique by shattering a stone through a frog. William explains that if Jonathan doesn't stop Dio, not only will he die, but all of humanity will too. Meanwhile, Dio regains his strength by draining people's energy and then feeding them to the drainpipe butcher. Jojo spent the entire week training with Zeppeli to master the spiritual energy of Hamon. William shares that when he was young, he joined his father's archaeological group, and during one expedition, he came across a stone mask. On the way home, his father put it on, which made him mercilessly kill everyone. It was discovered. Zeppeli was saved by the sun, which turned his father into dust. Therefore, William learned to use the energy of Hammon, which is very similar to the energy of the stone mask. Zeppeli was teaching Jojo to extend his limbs using this energy, but they were interrupted by Speedwagon, who told them about Dio killing everyone. Because they set off to stop Brando without finishing their training, Jojo would have to learn everything during the battle. As they entered the tunnel where sunlight couldn't reach, their carriage suddenly stopped, and Jack the Ripper emerged from the horse. Szczepeli decided to fight him, to demonstrate to Jonathan a masterclass and teach him the right mindset during battle. Jack tried to escape, and William told Jojo to go after him to finish him off, also giving him a glass of wine. Jonathan must deal with the Ripper without spilling a drop. Jack attacked him from the shadows like a rat, but glancing at the wine and recalling Zeppeli's training, Jojo defeats his opponent with a single punch through the wall. On their way to the city, Speedwagon asked Zeppeli to poke him with his finger so he could also use the Hammon spiritual energy, but something went wrong, and William missed, causing Speedwagon some trouble. While he was recovering, a kid suddenly darted out of the bushes and stole their suitcase filled with money. Jojo and Zeppeli decided not to punish the thief, but instead use his help to reach the city. Using spiritual energy, they crossed the river and then struck the rock and caught a falling boy named Poco. It turns out that not everyone is eager to catch falling thieves, which is why a cemetery has formed at that spot. The sun set, and William concluded that the boy had been hypnotized to lure them to this place. They saw Dio standing on a cliff, and at that moment, zombies began to emerge from the graves beneath their feet, which they quickly took down. Zeppeli wanted to fight Dio alone, but Brando quickly understood how his spiritual technique worked and began freezing the blood in his veins. Dio was about to break William's arm, but at the last moment, Jojo saved him by placing his own hand in the way. Brando started freezing Jonathan's blood, and to stop him, Zeppeli kicked Dio, but he broke his leg. Dio said they were not worthy to fight him, and commanded these zombies, who were once knights, to kill them. Zombies started sucking Jojo's blood, but Zeppeli couldn't help him as his hand was frozen, and Speedwagon began melting the ice on William's hand with his body. The zombie knights were named Bruford and Tarkus. They served Mary Stuart, who was being taken captive by Elizabeth I. Elizabeth made a deal with them, promising to spare Mary's life if they surrendered to her. They agreed, but she deceived them. Before the execution, the executioner told them that Maria was already dead. The knights were enraged, but they were unable to free themselves and were ultimately beheaded. Bruford was impressed by Jojo's strength and resilience and asked Tarkus not to interfere in their fight. Bruford attacked Jonathan, but he managed to dodge, although he fell off the cliff into the river. Since Jojo can't breathe underwater, he won't be able to use the Hammon power, so Zeppeli and Speedwagon rushed to help him, but Tarkus stopped them. Dio said they had no chance of winning against the knights and went off to turn all the townspeople into zombies. Jojo began to suffocate underwater, but instead of surfacing, he swam to the bottom. Since it was a mining town, the ground had subsided, and Jonathan found air trapped between the rocks. One breath was enough to use the spiritual power of Hammon, and he knocked Bruford out of the water onto dry land with a single blow. Bruford is grateful to fate for the opportunity to fight such a worthy hero as Jojo, then attacks him. He binds Jojo's limbs with his hair so that he cannot use his spiritual power and begins draining his blood. When Bruford was about to slash him with his sword, Jojo tore apart the hair and, using the power of Hammon, tore off his arm, after which he started wildly punching him in the face. Due to the battle with Jonathan, Bruford regained his humanity, and having the chance to behead Jojo, decided not to, stopping the sword at his face. Bruford acknowledged his defeat and said that thanks to Jonathan, he finally found peace. He marked his sword with blood and gifted Jojo his weapon, then passed away. Tarkus was not pleased by this and attacked them, but with the help of Hammon energy, Zeppeli and Jojo fused the leaves together and escaped from Tarkus. Zeppeli explained how he learned to use the spiritual energy. He traveled up a river in Tibet to meet with Tonpeti, who taught him everything. Because of this, the path William took was destined to end in death, but he decided not to tell Jojo about his fate. While he was recounting this, Tarkus attacked them, forcing them to jump into the night training fortress. Jojo entered the castle, but it was filled with many traps, and Tarkus caught Jonathan in one of them. The Hammon spiritual energy is not meant for breaking objects, so Jojo cannot break his collar. The key to unlock the collar is in the opponent's collar, meaning the only way to get free is to behead Tarkus. Speedwagon and Zeppeli tried to get inside to help, but the door only opens from the inside. Because the opening is too small for Speedwagon and Zeppeli, Poco had to go, although he was a bit scared. Tarkus didn't like someone interfering in their fight, and he hit the boy, but Poco managed to reach the lever and open the door. William remembered Tonpeti's prophecy and headed towards Tarkus. We are shown Zeppeli's memories. During training, William asks Tonpeti to tell him where and how he will die. The mentor says that he will die a not-so-scary death in a closed room, saving a young lion bound in chains, with the door opened by a child. William began to fight, but Tarkus caught him with chains and tore him in half, then broke Jomazunu's neck. Zeppeli, with his last strength, transfers his abilities to George and gives him all his life energy. Gaining new power, Jonathan breaks his collar and decisively defeats Tarkus. George begins to mourn Zeppeli, but William urges him not to waste time and to proceed with destroying the stone mask, as he is their only hope, after which they burn him. Then we see Dio, who was about to kill a woman and her child. The mother begged him not to harm her baby and offered her life in exchange for the child's safety, but Dio broke his promise and turned the woman into a zombie, who then ended up eating her own child. Speedwagon, Jojo, and Poco set out to save the town, and on their way encounter Adams, who has turned into a zombie and attacks them, but Jonathan quickly takes him down. There they also meet Dyer, who is mistaken for a zombie. He attacks Jojo to test how much he has progressed under Zeppeli's guidance. Then Stritz comes out and delivers a letter from William, in which he asks them for help. And finally Ton Pete, Zeppeli's mentor, appears. They unite and head to Dio's castle, where Poco's sister is held captive. Poco's father gave him a scolding because he came home after 9 and said Poco's sister got worried and went searching for him. Dio tries to get through Poco to bed, but she refuses and slaps him. Because of the refusal, he introduces her to Debbie and leaves. A zombie is about to eat her, but Jojo stops him. Debbie attacks him with snakes, but Jonathan doesn't have time to deal with lackeys and he quickly defeats him. Jojo reaches Dio and is about to start a battle, but Dyer intervenes. It turns out Dio killed his close friend and he wants revenge, but he lacks the strength and Dio kills him. However, Dyer managed to hinder him by stabbing Dio's eye with a rose. Brando ordered his zombies to eat them and began to fight Jojo himself. Using the fact that Brando has a blind spot due to his gouged out eye, Jonathan cuts off his arm and then slices him in half. But Dio turns out to be alive, grabs him by the carotid artery and freezes his limbs. Speedwagon wanted to help, but he was stopped by the zombies. Brando made a mistake because there was fire behind him, which melted Jojo's sword, and using spiritual energy, he gave him a solid hit. But it didn't work again, as touching Dio caused Jonathan's body to freeze. Dio recovered and attacked Jojo. Jonathan set his gloves on fire, and using the power of Hamon, struck Dio again. This time it was lethal, as Dio couldn't stop him because of the fire on Jojo's hands. Before his death, Dio severs his own head to prevent the Hamon energy from reaching him. Eventually, a Chinese man takes his head to find him a new body later. Meanwhile, Speedwagon destroys the stone mask. Jonathan Joestar and Irina got married and set off on their honeymoon to America. Dio's head was also on the ship. During dinner, Jojo notices the Chinese man and realizes Dio is alive. He asks Irina to lock herself in their cabin and rushes after him. A priest notices the chest containing Brando, but dies from a spike on the chest. The Chinese man retrieves Dio's head and Dio begins to speak, saying that he respects Jojo and wants his head to possess Jojo's body. Dio shoots beams from his eyes that paralyze Jojo's spiritual technique. Irina runs to them, and it turns out that all the passengers have turned into zombies. The Chinese man was about to cut off Jojo's head, but Jojo, using his last bit of strength, defeats him. Jonathan arranged it so that the Chinese man blocked the steam valve, meaning the ship was going to explode. Jojo asked Irina to take the child and escape to save themselves from the explosion. But she hesitated, and Jonathan had to protect them with his own body. At that moment, Dio begins to seize him, but Jojo pulled a shard from his body, and with its help, grabbed Brando so they would perish together. The steamboat exploded, and Jonathan Joestar died. However, Irina managed to survive by climbing into a chest with the baby. At the end, we see the Pillar Men, but more about that in the next part. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to support my channel. See you in the next video. Subtitles by Dima Torzok. Subtitles made by Dima Torzaka.